This is the most famous haunted house case in American law. It's often called the Ghostbusters ruling, and it's a perfect example of how sometimes the law just has to surrender to the absurd. This is the Stambovsky versus Ackley, where we unpack the legal drama you didn't know you needed. We're not talking about murderers or thieves. We're talking about poltergeists. Our story begins in Nyack, New York, with Helen V. Ackley. Now, Ms. Ackley was not a quiet homeowner. She was a ghost celebrity. She genuinely believed her house was haunted, and she was thrilled about it. She published articles in the local press, she gave interviews, and the house was featured in Reader's Digest. I mean, forget curb appeal, this house had supernatural appeal. It was literally on the map as a haunted spot. Enter Jeffrey M. Stambovsky. He's a buyer from New York City. He finds this beautiful riverfront Victorian, signs the contract for $650,000, and is ready to close. He does his title search, he does his inspection. All the prudent buyer stuff. Then, before closing, he finds out. The house, it's notorious. It's the town's most famous spectral hotspot. Stambovsky says, "Hold up. My contract is with a living person, not a spirit world bed and breakfast." He sues to get out of the deal and recover his down payment. Stambovsky realized this wasn't your average creaky old house. He wouldn't want to go to the basement expecting cobwebs only to find an ancient, translucent figure doing a slow, ethereal shuffle. The ghost probably mumbled, "Been here since the colonial era, just keeping an eye on things." Then, as if a basement specter wasn't enough, he'd crawl into bed, eager for some much-needed sleep after a long day of unpacking, only for the bed to start rocking like he was on a haunted pirate ship. Just the ghosts rocking the bed again. Also, he might be up to find a single, perfectly polished 18th century button on his nightstand, or a small, antique lace doily folded neatly on his pillow. He probably spent weeks trying to figure out if these were warnings, historical artifacts, or just a passive-aggressive way of saying, "You're living in my house now." Here's where the law throws a wrench in the plan. At the time, New York was a strict caveat emptor state for real estate. This means the seller has no general duty to disclose non-physical, non-structural defects. You, the buyer, must ask the right questions and do your own investigation. Stambovsky tried to sue for fraudulent misrepresentation, arguing that Ackley's silence was a lie. The trial court said, nope. They reluctantly dismissed his case. Why? Because legally, you can't be defrauded by something that doesn't officially exist, like ghosts. But Stambovsky appeals. And this is where the First Department of the Appellate Division steps in, armed with the power of equity. Equity is the part of law that's all about fairness, conscience, and preventing unjust enrichment. The judge's witty reply, pop culture reference, and the bizarre subject matter of a legally haunted house cemented the case's reputation, and the rest is history. The phrase, "as a matter of law, the house is haunted," is the most famous line from the Stambovsky versus Ackley court decision, and it has a very specific legal meaning. It does not mean the court believes in ghosts or that it formally established the existence of poltergeists in the universe. Instead, it means that the seller, Ms. Ackley, was legally prevented, or stopped, from denying the existence of the ghosts because of her own prior actions. Who you gonna call? As a title song to the movie Ghostbusters asks. This is a humorous setup, referencing the iconic theme song and central premise of the movie Ghostbusters, which is about people called in to deal with paranormal problems. Applying the strict rule of caveat emptor to a contract involving a house possessed by poltergeists conjures up visions of a psychic or medium routinely accompanying the structural engineer and terminix man on an inspection of every home subject to a contract of sale. The judge is stating that it's ridiculous to suggest a buyer's reasonable inspection should include a way to detect the presence of ghosts or a ghostly reputation. A standard inspection covers things like the roof, foundation, and termites, not supernatural phenomena. The phrase, "plaintiff hasn't got a ghost of a chance," was used to show that Stambovsky was not entitled for monetary damages, but entitled to the remedy of rescission due to the seller's unique and publicized knowledge of the condition. The phrase, "a hobgoblin which should be exorcised," was used. A hobgoblin is a mischievous, ugly little goblin. Here, it is used metaphorically to mean a foolish, troublesome, or persistent error in legal thinking. The judge is using appropriately spooky language to describe the faulty logic. Since Ackley created the problem and it was essentially unknowable to the buyer, the court granted Stambovsky rescission. That means the contract was cancelled, and he got his deposit back. He wasn't awarded damages, just freedom. The Stambovsky case is taught in law schools everywhere. It's a narrow exception, sure, but it stands for the principle that when a seller manufactures a defect that materially affects the bargain and is uniquely hard for a buyer to discover, equity will step in. The moral of the story: if you're selling real estate and your house is famous for its supernatural residents, you might want to disclose that little fact. Otherwise, you're just inviting a legal spooktacular.